Namaste, my name is Sanat Kumar. Welcome back to the Manana podcast. Manana is a Sanskrit word that means reflection or contemplation. In this podcast, I'll be sharing my deep, insightful reflections for you to contemplate and hence live a life of fulfillment. I hope you find great value in today's episode. If you have a garden and a library, you have everything you need, says Marcus Tullius Cicero. Well, it is time that I suggest to you one of the habits that have changed my life. Like we did in the first episode, we talked about note taking habit, and in the second, we talked about reminding ourselves of the mortal nature of our life. So, in this episode, we are talking about books, why to read books, what kind of books to read, and how to read books. Also, I wanted to share one of my reflections on this topic defending for reading books. Okay, first let's start with why. Why to read books? Why read books? It may seem obvious to some to increase your intellect, but that's just the surface. Reading books will give you a lot more than you can imagine. First of all, it makes great personalities accessible to you. Reading books is literally like having conversation with the author of the book. And I don't know whether you realize how much valuable that is. You get the author's perspective on life, his reflections, his wisdom nuggets, everything is given to you. An author is going through life and he has different experiences and reflections, and through that, he gets his wisdom and he's providing that to you because he thinks that is valuable. I think books should be the primary source of information, primary and the ultimate source of information, even in this technological era, even when we are consuming from the internet. Because books are, I think, the embodiment of wisdom. They are complete. Because most of the times when we are searching online, we are referring to only half truths. But when we are seeking, when we are learning through books, we are seeing at a more deeper sense of understanding. At least that is true for books that have written by great authors. Those great authors have written books not because they want to make money or to get fame or to anything like that. They want to share it because they have something valuable. They found out something they are so much excited to share to the world because they know it helped them and it might help others. So they are sharing in the intention of serving. So such kind of books are definitely very, very helpful. Okay, now let's continue on why to read books. Books have many benefits. Books build your database in a sense in your mind. Reading books increases your vocabulary, your knowledge on various topics, and hence your imagination and creativity gets skyrocketed. And if you're not interested in all that, if you're not interested in building a good database in your mind, you're not interested in increasing your vocabulary or your knowledge on various topics or your imagination and creativity, if you're not interested in any of that, books are still good. You know why? Because books are filled with great quotes. So instead of searching Google for best quotes to put onto your story, read books. And like these aren't enough, you get one more boon. The habit of reading books acts as a keystone habit to build other good habits in your lifestyle. It might be either a habit picked up from the book itself, or it might be merely small changes in your subconscious mind that will build more resilience or grit and build the habit to stick around longer in any of the life pursuits. And eventually, various dimensions of your life are expanded as a result of the habit of reading books. It might even bring enough competence in you to write a book of your own. Your personality, intellect, creativity will become like that of a leader. Harry S. Truman says, not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. So I think you might see how valuable and important reading is. So what to read? What kind of books to read? Start with anything that interests you. I think That's a very easy way to answer it. And if you don't know what you're interested in, start by reading the popular section, right? Popular fictions or non-fictions. After reading a couple of books, I think you'll get to know what interests you. Even I'm not a great reader. There are people who have read thousands of books. I've just read only 100 of them. But now I'm a voracious reader, I can say. I know I love brain science, psychology, philosophy, spirituality, marketing, business, the list goes on. History, whatnot. I like to read about peak performance, what makes great people great. And of course, there are spiritual scriptures. And that is why I don't want to call any book a self-help book. I don't believe in a category called self-help or personal development, because I believe every book is a self-help tool. Every book is a personal development tool, right? Because any book you read, there is so much to take away, there is so much for you to analyze and realize, and then make it a practical habit, right? Make it into practice. Just walk whatever that has been taught by that author. Then you will realize so many things. What I meant to say is, if you are suggesting or categorizing book as self-help, that means you haven't read enough of those, because you haven't realized how much valuable they are, because they are actually not self-help. They are belonging to any of the category. It might be spirituality, philosophy, psychology, science, whatever it is. Of course, I am leaning on to non-fiction. I am biased over non-fiction because for me fiction is not a great value for my time. When there is value and time ratio, I think non-fiction wins, because for the same time given, a non-fiction can deliver more. I agree that no, by reading fiction there is more tendency to create. Of course, by reading fiction you have more engagement, and there is more tendency of you to retain that information that you have read because of the story that was engaging. But but that's just your problem. If you are not able to retain what's there in non-fiction book, it's not the book's problem, right? So so start by reading popular fictions or non-fictions. At first, you may feel that only a particular topic is in your interest, but then over time, you will become a voracious reader of a large variety of books and highly vivid topics. And I suggest you read that way. My approach to reading book, my approach to reading books was this. I thought to myself, I'll first finish what the rest have read, the popular ones. Then I'll move on to the books which aren't read by many. Then I'll move on to the books which aren't read by many. But of course, that doesn't work out that way, because there are so many books that are read by everyone else. Because in the early days of reading, I got to know that reading what's unpopular is very important. But I didn't want to miss out on what's popular either. So now let's come into how to read. I suggest you not just read like a newspaper, but digest the book completely. Do whatever it takes to ensure that. It might be writing in the margins of the books, highlighting or taking notes, etc. Whatever. What I do is I I just mark those. I just mark lines that are important with my pencil, and importantly, the most important part of how I retain what I've read is through practice. I immediately turn what that sentence says into a habit. So if somebody says recovery and rest is important, and these are the types of recovery you can do, I will make sure that I make recovery as a habit. I'll make sure that I have a second wing workout. I'll make sure that I go for a nature walk. I'll make sure which gives me the flow state. So that is how I retain most of the things that I've read in all of the books I've read. And finally, I want to give you a little bit of my reflection. Spiritual leaders often suggest you burn books and that reading is of no use in terms of spiritual growth. True, reading books can only increase your intelligence but not your level in terms of spiritual growth. not necessarily at least. It is believed that reading books can form layers around you in the sense yourself. The ultimate realization is realizing yourself, right? And that process might be inhibited, right? The process to find your inner self may become a struggle, as you have now to penetrate those sheets around you because of the books you have read and the beliefs that are formed because of what you've read. So, when I got to know this initially, I was bewildered. It shook me because, on one side, reading books had changed my life. On the other, great spiritual leaders like Swami Vivekananda suggest throwing away books. But in fact, he was also a reader and he was also a writer. So, why would he write a book if he's suggesting not to read a book? But then I realized that it is only if you are unconscious and you're just believing what you're reading, right? I've written this in my blog 62, Worm and the Voice. I mentioned it that there is difference between knowing or believing and realizing. So realizing is what we need from books. If you're not realizing truths from the book, that means you're just believing the truth, right? Believing the truth is entirely a different path, and it is not of knowledge, it is not of wisdom, it is not of awareness. In this spiritual path that is of awareness, reading books is a waste of time if you are not realizing what you're reading. So you have to get it into practice. Then only you will realize things. You take something into practice, then you realize through the experience of getting into practice that this is the truth, and that is the little tweakings you want to do with that truth, or there is some nuance to the truth. So you will realize it only if you practice it, only if that truth is part of your life, right? Unless it is that, what great people have suggested is really true. It might inhibit your spiritual growth if you are not realizing what you are reading. For example, if you read Aham Brahmasmi and say that I am God, that means definitely you are off the path, right? You are not at all going near the realization, you are going away from realization. And one more perspective that helped me to continue reading books was I realized that I may not realize God or I may not realize the self in this life. It is surely unknown. But I know for sure that I can always seek awareness through books and make my choices based on the wisdom I receive from the wisest of the centuries through their books. Because a non reader is no better than the illiterate, right? So, if there's one thing you took from this blog, let it be this: read books, many of them, variety of them, and practice it, to realize what are the truths in it. Start building your libraries today. I hope you received excellent value in today's episode. To know more, head over to sanatkumarnebi.com, and if you haven't already, check out my book, The Flower of Fulfillment. Thank you for listening, and I wish you have a great day.